Welcome on board. It's a retirement planning webinar, and thanks, Phil, for coming online. Sorry I wasn't able to get you into the session to intro it, but I really appreciate you being on board. Just a disclaimer for everyone before we get started is that today's or this evening's advice is advice of a general nature only. Please seek personal advice before making any decisions. If you do want personal advice, the way that we assist you in doing that is we have you complete a questionnaire. Then we meet with you for an initial consultation where we seek to understand your goals, look at your current situation, and discuss the pros and cons of the range of options available to you. We can also, that might be all you need, or we can also give you specific recommendations in the form of a statement of advice. We can help you implement that advice and provide ongoing advice and monitoring. So that's the full advice process, but you can take it as far as you like along that process. In terms of retirement planning webinars, this one's about retirement planning in terms of how much you need for retirement, sources of retirement, income. The other two webinars that we normally do in the series are transition to retirement, so all the transition to retirement strategies, and capital gains tax and wealth transfer, a little bit more detailed strategies. What we're going to do is we're going to refer you to, for the time being, to the 2015 recordings of those webinars. So you can get that by going to cornerstonewealth.com.au/retire 2016. There'll just be one of the series of, I think there's about 5 videos listed there at the moment. We'll refer you to those videos for now because there are some legislative, we're in a bit of a legislative limbo land at the moment because of the recent election and so many initiatives being announced in the budget. And if they are clarified, it'll be a perfect time to then come back to those transition to retirement and capital gains tax and wealth transfer topics. In the meantime, the 2015 information is still valid, apart from the contributions cap that we can address later on in the session. So what we're proposing is that on the 15th of August, that is next month, we discuss Centrelink changes. So there are significant changes to the taper rates with Centrelink starting the 1st of January 2017. So we're going to address those and explain those to you on the 15th of August at a webinar at the same time as this one is being run. So the changes, the effects on you, and what you can do about it to maximise your age pension. One of the key changes that we've noticed in retirement and transitioning to retirement is the changes between what occurred when the age pension was originally set up at the early 1900s. So in the 1920s, the age pension was established when childhood went to your early teens, and then you worked until you were early to mid 50s, and then you would be considered old, which is this grey section of the bar, and then your life expectancy was 63, and so you would finish up at 60. You finished up work potentially at 60. The age pension kicked in around 60, and so you would only be on the age pension for a couple of years. As life expectancy has increased, the age pension has only increased increased recently up until 65 and now 67. So in the 1960s, you would be considered a child until your teens. Then they introduced a new adolescence, which brought you up until your 20s. You'd work until you were in your early 60s, but then still you'd have 10 years on the age pension, for example, if you didn't have sufficient funds to support yourself. What's happening now is that things have changed a little bit more in today's environment, where still you're a child until your early teens. Adolescence is going to a lot longer, up until potentially your 30s, and many of you are probably experiencing children staying with you a lot longer. And your work life is going from around that mid 20s through until mid 50s. And then there's been this in the Western culture, a new adolescence introduced, and they're calling it the portfolio lifestyle. And why I'm expressing this to you is that it's such a long time between you're turning what was traditionally the age at which you could retire, around 55, because that's when you could access your retirement resources, through until your life expectancy, which is now well into your mid-80s. And so this KPMG demographer titled this period the the portfolio lifestyle. And I'm actually introducing it because it actually is a reasonably healthy way to live, in that you're able to potentially scale back work a little bit. It might be a matter of doing less hours or working shorter full-time stints that enables you to go and do the travel that you wanted to do, or it enables you to do the mission trips that you always wanted to do, or perhaps spend more time with family. So I guess what I'm trying to express is that it's both been researched, and there's more and more research that suggests that it is healthy to work longer than the traditional pension ages or preservation ages where you can access your superannuation money. And it is healthy to push those, maybe work longer if it needs to be less hours, or for shorter stints of time. Or what I see a lot of people doing is not utilising long service leave to help refresh them and enable them to work longer. So many people just keep their long service leave and take it as a lump sum payment or at the end of their work life. And I see, and the research is showing that creating this period of time where you're healthy, potentially doing travel earlier with long service leave or other opportunities, working that little bit longer, whether it's part-time or not, it creates both financial, physical, emotional, positive outcomes. So just introducing those concepts to you, and on the back of that, I guess it also supports the idea that long-term reliance on the age pension is not going to be sustainable as we're living longer. And so there's going to be more pressure on the age pension age being increased. There's already legislation in place to increase it to 70 years of age as opposed to 67 that it is now. It just hasn't passed. You'll see on Centrelink's website that they're saying that this is going to be the case. It's going to increase to age 70. Legislation just hasn't passed to do that. So just introducing those as concepts to you, that it is healthy on many fronts to maintain work life beyond those traditional age pension ages. In terms of phases of retirement, and many of you ask questions about what should I be doing at what stage, this is basically research from an American research, the new retirement mindscape, and it talks about the emotional stages of retirement. And if you can try and identify which one you are in, it'll enable you to understand the emotions and potentially the things that you should do in each of these stages. So if we cap off with the first stage, the imagination stage, where you haven't really thought much about retirement, you potentially still got some kids at school, but potentially moving to college and becoming more independent. You might have aging parents, but you really haven't thought about a predetermined goal of what you need to save to fund your retirement. And so it's probably a little bit daunting to think about that you haven't actually worked out how much you need to save. You can start thinking about when you want to retire, what retirement will look like at that stage. The second phase is 3 to 5 years before retirement, and this can actually be a little bit stressful in terms of thinking about, I should be retiring in a few years, but I'm not quite ready. And the whole concept of retirement, I'm talking about retirement as finishing up work, but it doesn't need to be that. It can be working part-time, just scaling back work. Retirement can take many forms, and I'd encourage you to consider what it's going to look like for you, particularly for men who are going from full-time work to full-time retirement. It can have some negative health outcomes, so it's important to really consider that as well. So in the hesitation stage, it's really important to maximise your contributions to the likes of superannuation, take advantage of all the tax strategies that you can. And this is where traditionally we would look at the transition to retirement strategy. And if you want to learn more about that, go to the cornerstonewealth.com.au/retire 2016, and there's a recording of last year's transition to retirement webinar. And we'll do another one later in the year to refresh any changes in policies that are implemented post the election. The anticipation stage, which is a couple of years out, you feel more on track at this stage. You've learnt about your retirement income solutions and what's available to you. And many of you actually expressed wanting to know what you should be doing with your super at retirement. And we'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end of the session. The realisation stage used to be called the liberation stage, actually, because it's, you feel liberated because you finished up work, but it caused a lot of, I guess, stress where during the global financial crisis, where people had retired and they've seen their retirement, the value of their retirement savings go down, and it caused actual a fair bit of stress. But it is pretty common for that first year of retirement actually to be quite a stressful time. It's a fair time of transition, and whilst you might go and do all those jobs around the house that you've had on the list for a long time, you might be able to do the travel that you wanted to do in the first 6 months or so. We do really find that people after the 6 to 12 months of retirement, they're actually ready then to get engaged again, and whether that's volunteer work or getting back involved part-time with what they were doing previously, it is a pretty common thing, but it's not always the euphoria moment of walking out the door of work. It can have some challenges as well. But once you hit get past that first 12 months, and you hit the reorientation stage where you've got used to your the way that you're structuring your retirement, you've set things in place, you've established routines, and you've got used to where your income is coming from, and used to the structure of retirement. And then the reconciliation stage is where 16 more years post retirement, and you might start to see a few friends or family pass away. There might be more physical needs, and I guess you continue to feel happy, is what the research shows, but there might be anxiety and depression that can creep in at those stages. And then the long-term healthcare expenses and planning for your estate need to come into the picture at that point in time. So I guess the key thing here is trying to understand which phase you're in, and what actions you potentially, and what emotions you might be feeling, and also what actions you should be potentially undertaking. So one of the key questions in the lead up to retirement is, how much do I need for retirement? And that's answering that question enables you to understand how much you need in terms of funding your retirement. So if you know how much income you need, then you can work out how much capital you need, or how much money you need in your super or outside of super to fund your retirement. There's a few key ways to understand how much you need in retirement. One is just assuming that you need 65% of your pre-retirement income. It's not particularly accurate. Neither is basing it on others' experiences. But if you do have someone who's basically got the same lifestyle as you, same sort of spending habits, then you could actually base it on somebody else's experience who has retired. The best way to do it is to review your expenses and understand how they'll change. So if you're a couple and you're retiring, and you know that therefore you won't need 2 cars because you're not going to different locations each day, then you might be able to reduce the one vehicle expense. You might then need to add in some extra travel to travel around Australia or the world. So adding and subtracting all those changes in income is probably the best way to do it. But if you're not sure and you just want to go on averages, the Association of Superannuation Funds Australia puts out annual research, or actually I think it's done quarterly. 65. Steve's saying, is 65% assuming you own your own home? Yeah, well, all of these are assuming you own your own home, actually, Steve. So yes, under each of these scenarios, it's assumed that you own your own home. So if you use ASFA standards and you are single, then a modest retirement is going to cost around $23,651 is what the research suggests. A modest retirement for a couple is $34,000. You can see that's quite close to the age pension. So you're basically living on the pension in terms of a modest retirement for a couple at $34,000. Comfortable retirement for a single is closer to $43,000, and for a couple closer to $59,000 under current figures. And so if you want to just take the averages, then that's not a bad way to go. So, and you might ask then, well, what is a modest retirement? What is a comfortable retirement? Well, a modest retirement lifestyle is better than the age pension, but still only able to afford fairly basic activities. The comfortable retirement means you've got a broad range of leisure and recreational activities, and you can purchase household goods, private insurance, buy a reasonable car, and replace it every 10 years or so. I've got another chart, and if you want to come back to this later, I won't go into it in a lot of details, just listing the differences between comfortable, modest, and the age pension. And so if you look at travel, for example, under a comfortable retirement, you might have one annual holiday in Australia. Modest might be just one or two short breaks in Australia near where you live each year. And the age pension is even shorter breaks or day trips in your own city. So you can have a look at this and get a gauge of what the differences of those types of retirement standards are, and then work out where you might fit in as well. So just another way of working out how much you might need to live on, but the best way is to know exactly what you need to budget for each year. So how do you fund your retirement? So you've worked out exactly how much income you need each year, and then that means you can work out how much you need to retire. And many of you asked how many how do I know when I can retire, and how much do I need? How much capital do I need to retire on? Well, there are three main sources of income in retirement. One is your superannuation, and one is the age pension if you are eligible for it, and the other is other savings. But as mentioned earlier, many people are also considering employment and business as other income sources as well. So if you're employed and on the age pension, you can earn up to $6,500 each as a couple or individually as a single, without it affecting your age pension. So that is like $6,500 of additional income that's not going to impact in your age pension, and it's just going to boost your disposable income. So don't discount employment and business as another alternative source in retirement. I know it means that you're therefore not fully retired, but I guess the concept is that retirement's a bit of a fluid concept. If you do need to fund your income requirement totally with your own resources without the age pension, then there was this rule of thumb which is that you need 12 times your income requirement. So that's if you need an income of $60,000 per annum, then you need 12 times that, or $720,000 in capital to provide for that income. But that assumes that you're getting an 8.3% return on that money, and it also assumes that you're not eating into the capital, so you're not actually drawing down on the capital each year. If you wanted to do that with a lower level of return, then you might use the 15 times rule, which is 15 times the 60 grand or $900,000 in capital. Now, I know many of you might be concerned about that being a large amount of capital that you require to provide that comfortable retirement. Now, as we'll see in the coming slides, that you don't necessarily need that amount of money now to provide for your a comfortable retirement if you get a part age pension and if you eat into the capital a bit. And that's what I'll try and help explain in these next coming in a few slides shortly. So apart from your superannuation balance, you can also access the age pension if you're eligible. This is your eligibility for the age pension is dependent on, firstly, your age, and the ages, I guess, were initially 60 and 65, 60 for women and 65 for men. Now that's now increased to the point where people becoming eligible for the age pension now are at least 65, and men and women are the same, and then it's increasing through until 67 depending on your date of birth. So check out what your date of birth is, and then you'll know what your age pension age is. So just focus on this bottom section of the chart because most of you in that demographic. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the age pension age for those born after, I think, 1958 might start to increase slowly to 70 years of age, depending on whether that legislation passes. I've got a question from Stephen saying, do country versus city demographics matter here, or is it similar between two places? They don't differentiate, Stephen, between retirement living standards, city and country, but I'm sure that is the case, that it is lower in the country. So that's where you need to take your own situation into account. They did actually, I noticed when I was checking this year's figures, they did actually have a different figure for 15 from 65 to over 80, and I guess it was trying to show that your expenses might decrease later on in life, later on in retirement. But it's incredible how it was very, very similar. Many people assume that your income needs later on in retirement will drop significantly. But it's incredible that they, like, I find it interesting that it doesn't drop that much. In terms of age pension, income and income test thresholds, if you are earning less than, or if you're getting income less than $164 per fortnight and you're a single, then you get the full age pension. If you're earning over that per fortnight, your pension will reduce by 50 cents in every dollar over that $164 per fortnight. So you can still be earning up to, as a single, up to $49,700 and still get a part pension. If you hit that, then you get no age pension at all. A couple, the figures change to $292 per fortnight. That is $7,592 per annum, and you can still get the full age pension, again reducing by 50 cents each dollar over $292 per fortnight. So a couple can still earn up to $76,000 and still get a part pension at the moment. So that's the income test for the age pension. There is also an asset test. So if you've got assets currently as a single homeowner of $209,000, then you get the full age pension. There's an income and assets test. So you're either tested under the income test and assets test. So if you're under the assets test, it'll be, and you got assets less than $209,000, you get the full age pension. But they're going to change, and there's the next webinar we're going to address this change on the 1st of January 2017, where the lower threshold is going to increase. So there's going to be more people on the full age pension, but then there's to balance that out, there's going to be less people with resources that are going to be eligible for the pension. So a single homeowner who's got currently less than $791,750 in assets can still get a part pension, but that's going to drop down to $547 as of the 1st of January. So a significant cut for a couple who owns their own home. They can currently have 1.175 million of assets and still get the part pension. That's going to drop significantly. If you have assets, if your assets as a couple and you're eligible for the age pension is sitting at $823,000, your pension is potentially going to drop around that $14,000. So it's a significant drop in pension for somebody in that area. We're going to talk about in the next webinar. There are some things you can do. So tune into that next webinar if you're interested in that. For a couple homeowner and you've got assets other than your home of less than $296,000, you get the full age pension. So there's the income and assets test. You might be tested on the income test or the assets test, whichever provides the lower age pension. That's what you'll be tested under. And you can see the non-homeowner examples here as well. If you do come off the age pension on the 1st of January 2017, you will go automatically be moved to the Commonwealth Senior Health Care Card, which means that you'll retain the pharmaceutical concessions, but you don't get the other. It's different in each state, but you might not get the concessions on utilities and registration and those sorts of things. Oh, thanks, Kevin. I just asked the question what assets are. So assets are everything apart from your home, basically. So cars, contents, your superannuation, bank accounts, shares, other investments, caravans. They all are classified as assets except for your family home. There are other exempt assets, but broadly that's what an asset consists of. Thanks for the question, Kevin. Good one. So now we're just going to talk through an example. So we're going to choose in this first instance a couple, Joe and Mary, who are going to live on the comfortable, this is modest retirement lifestyle of about $34,000 per annum. They've got the average super balance of $120,000 for Joe and $50,000 for Mary. So $170,000 of investable assets total. We're assuming a 4.7% return, which is like a balanced fund return. They're retired, they've got no mortgage. So this is what most of the assumptions are, that you've got no mortgage at that point in time. Now, as you can see, so this charts, and we're going to use these charts to try and explain how much you need in retirement over the next few slides. So the concept here is that this red line here is the $34,000 income requirement being indexed up with inflation. So it starts off at 34 and it increases to a bit over 120,000 when Joe and Mary are around 100 in 35 years' time. So that's just indexed up with inflation. Now, these green lines are what expenditure or what income they've been able to achieve, and that's sourced from both the age pension and the superannuation earnings. And you can see that the green line is bigger than the red line, which means that they've got surplus money, and so they're saving money, putting money in the bank each year, which means that their net assets, this excludes their home, continue to go up. So they continue to save from the 170,000, and it grows up to about $600,000 in assets when they're close to 100. And that's because they're basically living on the age pension and they're saving all their earnings in their superannuation fund. Just to show where those sources of income are coming from, you can see here that mainly they're living on the age pension, which is the aqua sort of colour, and then the purple bit is their pension income from their superannuation. But over time, they end up saving that, and so they build up some, and we're just assuming they're putting it in the bank, and so they're building up some earnings in interest, which is this orange line, or investment income over here. So you can see that mainly the income's being provided by the age pension, a little bit of superannuation money being that purple bit, and then some more income adding to that over time. Last time I did this, I got lots of questions about, well, what about singles? You mentioned couples all the time. So I've tried to also run the figures for singles as well, but they generally provide similar outcomes. So we've gone the modest retirement income of $24,000 for a single. Again, this is just taking Mary this time. We've assumed $120,000 of funds in super, and a similar sort of outcome. The $24,000 is well and truly provided for. You're generating more income than required because you're largely living off the age pension and just generating a bit more income from super. So very similar scenario to a couple, actually. But that's for those of you who are single. The example number 2 is now, we've switched now to the comfortable retirement, so the $59,000 retirement. But again, we've only got, so it's Joe and Mary again as a couple. We've only got $170,000 in super, so the same amount, but now we're living on $59,000 rather than $34,000. So we're going the comfortable lifestyle, same earnings, same super. And what happens here is that our retirement savings last until they are 73, and then they're not able to meet their income requirements after that. And so there's a big gap. So now they're basically living on their age pension income throughout the rest from 73 onwards. So they've lived on $59,000 and then dropped down to 34 because all they've got left is the age pension to live on. So you're saying, well, I want to live comfortable retirement. How much do I need, therefore, to live on a comfortable retirement? So in the next scenario, we've just done the same thing for a single. So we've said Mary on 43, which is a comfortable retirement, 120,000 in super, same sort of result, runs out of super or around 71 years of age, sorry, a couple of years earlier being a single. So how do you change things? How do you make sure that you're able to live on that comfortable retirement long term? Well, the key thing would be to have more superannuation. And so now we're saying, well, let's have, rather than 170, let's have 600,000. We're saying Joe's got 450,000 and Mary's got $150,000. And in this scenario, they're still drawing on their money, so they're meeting their income requirement here, you can see. They're drawing on their capital, so they're eating into their capital each year. But you can see now that they're actually able to provide for their income right out until 90 years of age. It's not until they reach 91 that they start to not quite meet their income requirement, but it's still a couple of years before they are then starting to rely fully on the age pension. So it's 93, 94 that they've now only reliant on the age pension. So hopefully this is painting the picture of how much you might need to save for your retirement. But you might actually be working part-time, you might work beyond 65, you might have other investments. So there's a lot of different factors, but one of those factors is that you also might get this is the same scenario for a single. So 43,000 of expenditure, 450k in super. It pushes that you can. Mary is able to live on this retirement lifestyle until she's about 91. So very similar in the single and couple, but obviously we have assumed not half the amount for a single, but it's about 3/4 of the amount for a single. Another thing that you could do potentially to make your retirement assets go further is to take more risk in the investment. So rather than a 4.7% return, which is like a balanced option, you could go more of a growth option. Now, there is risk that you'd actually do worse because markets perform worse, but if you actually manage the risk and have a sufficient cash to pay for your pension income over the years and not touch the assets in low years and then move it across to cash in high years, then you might be able to achieve a 6.1% return, and then your assets last a lot longer just by getting a higher level of return. So there are other different things you can do to make your assets last longer, but there's no guarantee with that either. As you know, there are things that occur like global financial crisis and things like that can occur that can put a little a dent in those sorts of returns over the shorter term, but over the long term, you would ideally achieve those returns with higher levels of risk. I often get the question about, well, I don't want to wait until my pension age to retire. I want to retire when I can access my retirement savings. And for most people at the moment, that is 56 years of age is the preservation age, and that's the age at which you can access your superannuation money. So how much more resources would you need to provide for a comfortable retirement should you want to retire? And we're saying here that Joe and Mary are going to retire at 56. You might need about $250,000 to $300,000 more to provide for that 9 years where you're fully self-sufficient relying on your own resources before you reach pension age, and then can start to substitute your retirement savings with some age pension. And then it's so this represents eating into your own resources in the 9 years prior to pension age, and then you're not eating into your resources as much for the next few years because you're supplementing your income with the age pension, and then as you get older, your assets taper off. You start to use them up a little bit more. So that's for those of you who are thinking of retiring prior to your age pension age. It does cost a lot more because you use more of your resources the earlier you retire below your age pension age if you are eligible for the age pension at age pension age. Just had the question from Dale about is the family home an asset? No, the family home, as long as it's under 2 hectares of land around the home, is not included in the assets test. Peter's asked if the spouse is working and earning more than 60 grand, will that rule out any pension or health concession? No, as I mentioned earlier, the income test is about $76,000. So depending on your assets, you still might be eligible for a part age pension. As the person who is pension age might be able to get a part pension there in that instance, Peter. So that's trying to give you a sense of how much you might need in retirement, but it is very much dependent on your income requirements, and everybody's different. So that's the key thing that you need to understand, how much you need to live on. So that's the key part of the presentation for this evening. Now you can get more information from the Christian Super Help Desk at 1300 360 907, the Christian Super website. There are recordings of the webinar at the Christian Super website under member webinars. I'm pretty sure that still is valid. Otherwise, you go to free stuff on the Christian Super website. If you're seeking personal financial advice, then please make contact either via our phone number or the Christian Super website. But now I'll go into answering your questions. So if you do have a question, do enter it via the chat section, or I will just cover off a few of the questions that came through that I didn't answer in that main content. And one of them that came up regularly was, when can I access my superannuation money? Well, you can access it in some format when you reach your preservation age, and that's dependent on your date of birth. So check out your date of birth here and then look up your preservation age. Your preservation age is when you can access your super. Once you've worked out that, then you need to know, well, in what format can I access my super money? And that's dependent on whether you've satisfied a condition of release. If you haven't satisfied a condition of release, then the only way that you can access it is via a transition to retirement pension or a non-commutable account-based pension. Now, if you do move your super from the accumulation phase, to the pension phase prior to satisfying a condition of release, the maximum you can draw from it is 10% per annum, but you also have a minimum of 4% that you need to draw from it. So you can access your super at your preservation age. There are some tax implications if you are under 60, but drawings from superannuation whilst you are over 60 are tax-free. Now, the way that the condition of release works is that if you've reached preservation age but you're below 60 years of age, to satisfy a condition of release, you need to cease gainful employment, and then you also need to declare that you don't intend to become gainfully employed again. Now, gainfully employed means you're working more than 10 hours a week. If you're working less than 10 hours a week, then you still satisfy the definition of retirement, and therefore you can satisfy a condition of release and have full access to your superannuation money. There's a different rule once you've reached 60 years of age. You need to be you don't need to satisfy this intent to never again become gainfully employed. All you need to do is cease gainful employment. And so when you're 60, if you have 2 jobs and cease one, that's sufficient to satisfy a condition of release. You can get full access to your super money, and that money is tax-free if you're over 60. So that's the second way of satisfying a condition of release. The third way is a catch-all. When you turn 65, you have full access to your superannuation money. So many of you were asking that question, so it's good to cover it off. Another question that came up was, well, what do I need to do with my super in the transition to retirement and in the pension phase of and in retirement? So leading up to retirement and in retirement, what should I be doing with my super? Currently, the rules are that in the accumulation phase, earnings on your superannuation are taxed at 15%. In the pension phase, it's currently no tax. So there is an advantage this financial year to be moving your superannuation to pension phase, because there's no tax on the earnings within the pension phase. Now, the announcements in the budgets in this year's budget was that they were going to tax pension funds that are in that transition phase at the same as an accumulation phase. So that benefit could cease from 1st of July 2017, depending on what gets through legislation. But it is good currently to move to pension phase. And if you have retired and you're not, you've got a standard account-based pension, then you'll get those 0% tax rates. Or if you're over 65, you'll get those 0% tax rates. So well worthwhile moving to pension phase. Some people ask, how does that all work? What does that mean, moving to pension phase? Well, it's just like having a second account. So you could leave a small balance in your accumulation fund, but say, for example, you had 200 in your accumulation account, which is a normal superannuation account. You could leave $5,000 in it if you thought you might still be working, so you can continue to contribute to it. Or if you don't need that fund anymore, you can roll over the whole amount to pension phase. But basically, setting up a pension account is just like opening another bank account. You simply roll over the money in that accumulation phase to pension phase, and that means you've got a pension account set up and you can start drawing from it. If you leave your superannuation account, your accumulation account open, you can keep putting your co-contribution money into it. You can put employer contributions, any salary sacrifice into it. But when you're in pension phase, you need to draw a minimum amount each year. So it's either 4% between 55 and 65, 5% between 65 and 75 years of age. You've got to draw that money out into your bank account. Now, if you're eligible to put that money back in, then you can still put that money back into your super account if you don't need it. But that's effectively what it is. It's just having another account. You may leave your accumulation account open, or you just may have the pension account. But both accounts are invested in similar 5 investment options, so they still get investment growth on both accounts. But that's generally how moving to pension phase works. A number of you asked about contribution limits. The contribution limits, there's 2 types of contributions. They've both been changed. So current rules are, for this financial year, if you're under 50 years of age, then you've got a contribution limit of $30,000. If you're over 50 years of age, it's $35,000. Now that's going to change, or it's proposed that it will change next financial year. They're both going to change from 30 and 35. They're proposed to change to 25. So these will be 25, but that's not until the next financial year, so 1st of July 2017, if legislation is passed. Pretty sure it will, because I think the Labor adopted that policy as well. Non-concessional is a little bit more confusing. The current legislation is that you can put up to $180,000 per annum, so 65 years of age, sorry. And there's this bring forward rule where you can put up to 540, but during the budget they announced that they're going to limit this to a lifetime limit, not a 3-year limit, a lifetime limit of $500,000. So you really need to be very careful about these non-concessional contributions, because whilst this is the current rule, they have announced that as of budget night, it's a lifetime limit. So make sure you don't waste those contributions on unnecessary contributions to your super. And it may well be worth waiting to see what happens and what is legislated before you do too much of those types of contributions. Stephen says, is a property portfolio an advantage to retirement or disadvantage? Well, any additional assets are an advantage. Definitely, whether it's best to hold it as a property portfolio or more liquid assets, really gets down to a comparison between investment returns and whether you're happy to manage properties and deal with tenants and those sorts of things. Obviously, property has done really well. Well, generally done really well. I know it's so different in different areas. So you might look at some mining towns and you would have said, well, property's done really badly over the last couple of years as the mining boom's tapered off. But yeah, it definitely can be an advantage. The thing about property is that it can be a lumpy asset. So if the rental return isn't generating the income that you require, then you can't just sell off the garage and just sell the whole asset. So properties, it just depends on what your preferences are. The thing you need to decide with property is whether you do it, what structure you invest in. So is it in your own name? Is it in super? Is it in a trust, for example, and work out what the best option is for you with that. Thanks, Stephen. Philip says, if I am 65 and my wife is 63 at present, will she be excluded from any government pension? It really depends on what your income and assets test are. She'll be excluded from an age pension, but you'll get if you satisfy the income and assets test, you will get the pension. And depending on what your income and assets test is, you might get a part pension, you might get a full pension. Just the person who is of pension age, Philip, gets the pension, if that makes sense. So how it works is that you add up both your income and assets as a couple and you divide it in half effectively for the test, for the income and assets test. Steve says, we are self-employed and therefore have very little super. Any suggestions? Yes. Try and salary sacrifice as much as possible, or make deductible contributions. That's the challenge of businesses, to draw out value from the business over time. If you can sell the business for a value when you do retire, then you can currently use the small business CGT concessions. You might be able to put money into super from the sale. But if you're self-employed and there's no business value, then the key thing is to really start to tax effectively get money into super through those deductible contributions. You save tax on your income tax and you build up your retirement savings, but it's all about managing the cash flow. Yeah, that's the best thing you can potentially do. Paul says, I am 57 and can I transfer to pension phase? If you are currently 57, based on those, your preservation age, you can transfer to pension phase, yeah, certainly. John says, is there any point in balancing up funds in accounts between husband and wife? Yeah, a number of you asked this question. I might just jump to that slide, actually. I think this was it here. So Jeff and Belinda and now John, I think, have asked the question of, should I and my wife use the same retirement fund and split amounts? Got 340k and 140k. Does it make a difference? And then Belinda asked, should couples amalgamate their super? Now, there's pros and cons of both. If you're going to be, if your balance isn't going to be around that the upper limit that they're proposing to introduce of the 1.6 million in super, then it is not a bad thing to consolidate into one account. But often you've got to balance that up with. So, and the benefit of that is that you've got a single account. If that person dies, the account can you can set it up to be passed to the surviving spouse. The benefit of that is that you might save a member fee of $90 or $91.50 or something like that. So that's the annual benefit of eliminating one account from a Christian super perspective. So there's not a massive gain. It's around that $90 a year that you save by combining accounts. But you can't really combine accounts, so to speak. You can't amalgamate them. You've got to withdraw the money from one account, put it into the bank account and put into your bank account. And then if you're eligible, you can contribute it to the other spouse's account. So you can't actually just amalgamate them into one account. You've got to actually cash it out and then contribute it to the other account. So you need to make sure that you're eligible to do that before cashing it out. But there's not a massive difference. And then the other thing about evening up account balances, and with this might be more so Jeff's question, is that you could potentially even up your account balances to, so if that's $480,000, you could even up your balances by having $240,000 in each account. The benefit of that is if for some reason they start to tax pensions over 60 years of age, they start taxing pensions, you can utilise 2 tax-free thresholds if you've got balanced accounts. So yeah, there's pros and cons of them. If you've got relatively low balances, then it's reasonable to consolidate into one. But you just need to weigh up all the pros and cons of that. John followed up with, if you are balancing up accounts, does that become their concessional or non-concessional you were talking about? Generally that would be a non-concessional contribution into your super. So it's part of that $500,000 lifetime limit. But you could claim a deduction on part of it if you're eligible to do that. Steve, no problem, Steve. Happy to help. So keep asking your questions via the chat section and I'll continue to answer them. There are just a couple more questions one of them was from Philip. When is the most advantageous time to sell an investment property in relation to age and retirement? Well, you need to factor in, the key thing here is whether there's capital gains associated with, as in, is there a big profit to be made on it, and therefore do we need to factor in tax? If you're earning income of $80K plus and you're on the 39% tax bracket and you sell a property in the year that you're earning that sort of income, you're going to lose, you're going to pay a fair bit in tax. But if you retired and then sold it in a year where you've got no income, then you could potentially save a significant amount of capital gains tax. If you're also able to make deductible contributions to super, you might be able to save more tax on that property. But it depends on whether you're eligible to get that money into the superannuation environment as well, if that's what you were planning on doing, or whether the investment property is already in super. So it really depends on capital gains tax, your current income levels, eligibility to put money into super, and your cash flow. So there's a range of factors to consider there, but it's well worth considering that. There is that webinar that we did on capital gains tax and wealth transfer that's available at cornerstonewealth.com.au/retire 2016, and you can get the capital gains tax webinar there. It's well worthwhile checking out if you've got capital gains on investment properties. It just helps you to manage those gains. And that's Philip's question. A number of questions were around how do I prepare for retirement? In particular, Catherine said, well, what if I still have a mortgage or a home mortgage when I retire from work? Well, leading up to retirement, actually, potentially any time in your life, these are a good rule of thumb to work towards. So this is focusing on retirement. So what are you going to do with your time? Key question that we addressed earlier. Now, these things anyone can apply. So pay off your consumer debt as soon as possible. Have an emergency fund, so build up liquidity or a cash reserve. That might be sitting in an offset account and available to you. or it might be earning interest somewhere. But generally we say 3 to 6 months living expenses at least, sitting in an emergency fund. Next, say for major purchases, so this is like cars, starting a business, education, and a house. Then you focus on paying off your mortgage and then building your retirement savings. Now you might combine some building retirement savings and paying off your mortgage parallel, but generally what you need to do is at retirement or work in build up to retirement to pay off all your debt. You don't want to be having debt in retirement really. And so the way that you could potentially do that is to draw money from your superannuation. That might be prior to retirement. You can start moving to pension phase and drawing money from your super to pay off your mortgage more quickly. Or it might be a lump sum when you retire and you can pay the last amount off with your superannuation. If your super is not enough to pay off your mortgage, then I would generally encourage you to work a bit longer if your health is okay, so that you've got at least some retirement savings there once your mortgage is paid down. The other thing you might be able to do is downsize, but be careful of assuming that you're going to net a lot from it, because often people don't after they factor in selling costs, stamp duty, and the like. So just need to factor that in as well. Take advantage of tax saving strategies and asset building strategies. So build up to retirement, really focus on salary sacrifice, moving to pension phase, any other tax saving strategies that you can apply at that point. We addressed Jeff's question. Jennifer asked, is it really important to have advice from an independent financial advisor? They charge so much. I'm a little bit biased because I'm an independent advisor, although we're not supposed to champion that as a term, independent advisor. The regulator doesn't like us using that. But it's well worth paying for advice. I guess you get what you pay for. If you go to banks, generally they might not charge you for a consultation, but they won't give you that much information until you sign up to a plan, and they won't charge you for a plan if they know that they're going to get a big commission from selling you a product. So I think it's best to just pay for the advice that you're getting, and then and I guess just try and find one that's in your price range that's suitable for you. But if you need the advice, I think it's well worth paying for it. And I would rarely have a initial consultation where we haven't found savings multiple thousands times, thousands of dollars of tax savings, and our consultations are $385. So I can't think of a consultation where we didn't find savings well in excess of that consultation fee. Next, Jim asked about, Jim had trouble with the audio, but he had sent through a question earlier. I prefer my investments in property rather than the volatility of shares in these turbulent international times. I need more for retirement than can be achieved through banks, etc. That is the low interest rate banks, bank term deposits, I'm assuming. But in today's turbulent world, I don't feel comfortable with shares alone. I would prefer to invest in more stable Australian property market for the large portion of my investment. Is this possible? Yes, it's definitely possible. You can invest your superannuation money basically however you like, but you just need to weigh up the pros and cons of it all and the diversification. So you can access Australian property directly, so you could be in residential real estate, or you can do it indirectly, but generally indirectly is not residential real estate. It's more like commercial property, retail, and office blocks and those sorts of property. You can invest in those in listed investment companies, listed REITs, real estate investment trusts. So you can do it in a unitized way, or you can invest directly as well. If you're investing directly in real estate, then you need to set up a self-managed super fund, and you need to deal with the lumpy asset issue. But definitely you can invest in unitized investments in Australian property. Christian Super doesn't allow you to drill down into the asset class, so Christian Super wouldn't be able to facilitate that for you, but you can invest in other superannuation funds, whether it be a self-managed fund that you set up, or other public offer funds where you can invest in direct Australian property. I think Christian Super will be going down that track in the future, but it's not something that's available now. You can't invest in those direct asset classes. I hope that helps, Jim. David said, drawing down from super when I retire, can I have a weekly amount transferred to the bank, or must I take it all in one go? Oh, another person asked this question as well, and thanks for the question, David. You can, with a Christian pension, for example, you can draw it in a variety of ways. You can draw the pension on a fortnight with a fortnightly pension, so every fortnight you get paid. Actually, I don't know. It's I think it's bi-monthly, so it might be twice a month rather than fortnightly. You can get it paid monthly, quarterly, and annually. So you do have that option to choose between those payment methods. You don't need to take it all in one go. No, you don't need to do that. Stephen says, appreciate your help. When can we access past webinars? Or where can we access? If you just go to that, I'll be emailing out a link to them, but if you want to look at some of the past webinars now, I've just put them all together on the cornerstonewealth.com.au/retire 2016. So just go to retire 2016. And they're also available on Christian Super's website under, if you go to christiansuper.com.au, free stuff, I think under there's videos and webinars, and you can get to access to some of them then. Philip, what is a reasonable consultation fee to pay for an independent investment advisor? We charge Philip $385 for our initial consultations. Now, it sounds like it might be reasonably expensive, but when you think about it, we put preparation time in it ahead of the meeting. We're spending at least an hour and a half with you, and then we're summarising the meeting to you as well. So it's almost 2.5 hours of time. So really, when you think about our charge out and what we need to charge to make a living, it's actually not that. It's not a real money maker in that respect. It's actually just covering costs to a degree. So yeah, we charge $385, but we also do talk quite meaty. We have meaty discussions. It's not just about what are your goals and what are you trying to achieve. It's actually, well, let's get into the nitty gritty. These are your range of options, etc. A lot of bank planners won't charge for plans, but they're really just how do you do's. They're not really talking in too much detail, and really they're trying to sell you a product as opposed to give you advice that's right for you. So we charge $385. I'm sure some people are less, some people I know are more, but that's just how we structure it. The reason I've structured it that way is that I used to not charge when I first started my own business, but I'd spend a lot of time and I'd feel then a little bit uncomfortable, just giving all my knowledge, and then people not engaging for our services. Whereas where I charge, I feel like I can give as much information as possible, and I feel comfortable doing that. And I think it's the best outcome for both the client and us, that we get paid. We're trying to give you as much as we possibly can in that meeting, because for many people that initial consultation is all that they need, and then they can run with it there. Sometimes we write up recommendations for them, but it's not all the time. Well, thanks so much to everyone for being online. If there's no other questions coming through, I might sign off. If you do have other questions, you can give us a call. But another way you can do it is if you go to cornerstonewealth.com.au, retire 2016, which is what I mentioned before. It's still got the registration video on there. But here's all the videos that I talked about. So this is the last year transition to retirement video. This is the capital gains tax one. This is the Centrelink age pension. This is the Centrelink strategies. But if you do have questions, then down here in the discussion section here, you can just type in your question there, particularly if it relates to these retirement planning type topics, and we'll respond to you there as well. But so feel free to utilise that, and we can, try and assist as we can. So thanks so much for participating. Really appreciate it, and have a good evening. Good night.